The classic lineup of Megadeth to many fans consisted of guitarist and vocalist Dave Mustaine, guitarist Marty Friedman, bassist David Ellefson, and drummer Nick Menza. This lineup of the band lasted from 1990 to 1998 and released 4 albums. Musicianship, personality conflicts, and musical differences led to the classic lineup falling apart by the end of the decade. However, there was a moment of hope for a lot of Megadeth fans when in 2014 it was reported that the classic lineup would reunite. That's what we're going to discuss in today's video. By the late 80s, Megadeth had established themselves as a force to be reckoned with, but the band seemed to have a revolving cast of musicians coming and going. By 1989, the band was 3 albums into their career and were ready to write their follow-up 1990s Rust in Peace. Ahead of the album sessions, the band enlisted drummer Nick Menza and guitarist Marty Friedman. Drummer Nick Menza began his professional music career at age 18, and he would play in a series of groups, including Rhodes, who was fronted by Randy Rhoads' brother. He would even record with John Fogerty. By the late 80s, he would land a job as Megadeth's drum tech for Chuck Baylor. Baylor would be fired by Mustaine over his drug use, leading the frontman to ask Menza to join the group in 1989. He would appear on 4 Megadeth albums, with 1997's Cryptic Writings being his last. The following year, while out on tour to promote the album, Menza learned of a tumor in his knee, and he required surgery to remove it, and thankfully for him, it was benign. According to Menza, while he was in the hospital recovering from surgery, he would recall Mustaine calling him up to let him know he was fired from the band. Bassist David Ellefson would tell Metal Hammer why Menza was fired, saying, "It's funny, Nick has been and still is the most hailed and beloved member of the Megadeth legacy. Playing drums is hard, playing drums in Megadeth is even harder, and it beats the shit out of you. Nick put in a lot of good years with us, but by 1998, when he got fired, he was struggling to do the gig. There was a defining moment in Mesa, Arizona, where I looked up at him during some breaks in Darkest Hour, and it was like he wasn't present. He was beat up, you know." Marty Friedman, up until this point in time, had cut his teeth playing in several bands, including Hawaii and Cacophony. Friedman would be tipped off to the audition by a friend of his who told him Megadeth were looking for a new guitar player. Friedman would call Megadeth's manager Ron Lafitte and book an audition. His audition would show up on the group's DVD Arsenal of Megadeth years later, and Friedman would admit to Loudwire that by the time he auditioned for the band in the early 1990s, he was borderline homeless, living with a woman he had met, and was sporting multicolored hair while surviving on a diet of rice and lollipops. But looks aside, Mustaine was impressed with Friedman's audition and hired the guitarist the same day. He would admit in the same interview that once he joined Megadeth, he could afford to go to a salon, and he cleaned up his appearance to look more presentable, to fit in with what he thought was Megadeth's clean-cut guy-next-door image. Interestingly enough, Friedman wasn't the only person on Mustaine's radar, as it was reported that Slash of Guns N' Roses was offered the spot in addition to Dimebag Darrell, who agreed to join provided his brother Vinny could also join the group, but the idea fell through since Megadeth already had a drummer at the time. Marty Friedman's last album with the group would be their universally panned record Risk, which came out in 1999, and for many fans, it's strayed too far from the band's traditional sound. By 2000, Friedman was out of the band, with MTV publishing a report at the time, with bandleader Dave Mustaine putting out a statement saying Friedman left to, and I quote, "pursue other musical interests," and Mustaine would reveal that Friedman was, and I quote, "an incredible player who had been a keystone in Megadeth, and that the band was sorry to see him go and wished him well." Al Pitrelli of the Trans-Siberian Orchestra fame would end up taking his place. Friedman, meanwhile, would move across the ocean to Japan and become a huge star in the country. Following his firing, Menza turned his attention to raising his 2 kids and took up woodworking. He would recall to Metalholic, "I took about 10-12 years off to raise boys," he'd say. And it was during that time Nick also made a living through his woodworking, selling a Peruvian percussion instrument known as a cajones. It was during this time in his life that Menza famously said, "I don't want to be Nick Menza, the drummer for Megadeth. That chapter of my life is closed." In addition to raising his kids, Menza would still play music on the side, putting out a single album under the moniker Menza, and would play with the jazz fusion group called Ohm. Fast forward to 2014, and there were rumblings that the Rust in Peace lineup of Megadeth would be reuniting. This reunion would include recording new material as well as touring, but unfortunately it wasn't meant to be. At this point in time, both Menza and Friedman would claim that the reunion fell apart due to money. The former members claimed that they weren't being compensated properly if a reunion was to take place, and this is something that's been partially corroborated by Mustaine himself. recalling the situation involving Friedman, saying, "Marty has had a really successful career in Japan where he makes quite a lot of money." And this is the part where I thought was a little weird, where he said that he has to pay all his team while he's gone instead of just himself. Because I thought, we'll pay you whatever you're making so that switching horses in the middle of the river, it's no big deal unless you fall off. And then when we found out that he wanted to sell his merch, his this, his that, his this, his that, then he wanted this crazy amount of money and he wanted to fly first class everywhere, I said to our management, I can't deal with this. Friedman would also add that musically, he wasn't really interested in what Megadeth had been doing since the years he left. While Friedman didn't get into a room and play with the band, Menza got as far as rehearsing with the group for a potential reunion, with David Ellefson recalling, "Nick and I were hanging out for about a year and a half before his death. That was when we reconnected, and he came down to Fallbrook where Dave's house is and studio was, and we jammed. We tried to see if we could make a go of the Rust in Peace reunion, and you could tell, as much as the ambition was there for it, it just didn't connect." Mustaine would corroborate this, telling Eddie Trunk that Menza's playing wasn't up to snuff, and he suggested having a different drummer play on the album, like Chris Adler from Lamb of God, and having Menza come back to tour with the group. But once Menza spoke with Megadeth's manager about how much he'd be paid, he would claim it was a very unfair deal, so the reunion fell apart. Mustaine would claim that the Rust in Peace reunion wasn't his idea, but bassist David Ellefson, telling Overdrive, "Dave really wanted to do the Rust in Peace thing, and I love Dave. He's my partner, so I figured we'll see what happens." When it didn't happen, of course, everybody blamed me, and I was just politely saying, "Go F yourself." Any of the previous lineups have always had at least one member that was not up to standard. For example, say the guitarist is great and the drummer is okay, or the drummer is great and the guitarist is okay, he'd say. The talk of the reunion also created some hurt feelings between the current members of Megadeth at the time, including drummer Sean Drover and guitarist Chris Broderick, who had both been in Megadeth for a number of years at this point. When they both got wind that somebody inside the Megadeth organization was pushing for a Rust in Peace reunion, they quit the group, forming their own project together called Act of Defiance. Sadly, any hopes for a full Rust in Peace reunion would be dashed in 2016 when Nick Menza would pass away on stage after suffering a heart attack during a gig with his band Ohm. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe, and we'll see you again in Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.